This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch on this Tuesday, August 12th. I'm Ephraim Graham. We're going to begin this half hour with news from the Middle East. Israel is pressing military and political pressure on Hamas in the final stages of its war in Gaza, and the country has strong support from Washington. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the campaign is nearing its end, and this all comes as there is international outrage over the death of a journalist, and anti-Semitic violence is surging abroad. CBN's Paul Petit brings us more now on our story from Jerusalem.
With Israel's planned takeover of Gaza City, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the war is nearing its end.
Especially in these days of great victories against those who came to destroy us, as we stand before the end of the campaign and work to defeat the remainder of the Iranian Axis and free all of our captives.
With the support of President Trump, Netanyahu says he won't agree to any partial hostage deal. Trump believes more military pressure is needed to get Hamas to agree to anything. Meanwhile, Senator Lindsey Graham went on Meet the Press and says Hamas must be crushed.
Enough already. Destroy Hamas. Do to Hamas what we did to the Germans and the Japanese during World War II, annihilate them and rebuild the Palestinian society like we did with Germany and Japan.
Israel is also dealing with international outrage over the killing of 5 journalists in an Israeli airstrike, including a prominent Al Jazeera reporter. The IDF says it has evidence he was a paid terrorist and cell leader, calling him a terrorist operating under the guise of a journalist. He's seen here taking a selfie with Hamas leaders.
Israel is stating that this was a journalist who has ties to Hamas, and we published those ties to Hamas back in October. So this is no new information for anyone. And more of the pictures and evidence that seems to be coming out shows that this journalist that had at least very strong connections to the main leaders of Hamas as well.
Meanwhile, more anti-Semitic attacks are taking place around the world. In Montreal, a Jewish-Canadian father was assaulted in front of his children. He was hospitalized and the suspect arrested. Israel President Isaac Herzog spoke with the father and said, "May you have a swift recovery in body and soul from this terrible ordeal. We are with you and we are here for you. The whole Jewish people stands with you." In Jerusalem, Paul Petit, CBN News.
Chris Mitchell joins us now to continue our coverage. He's our bureau chief. So, Chris, what are Israelis saying about Benjamin Netanyahu's speech that the war is nearing its end?
Well, Ephraim, some agree with what Netanyahu is saying. Others disagree. Some actually on the right, like the finance minister Smotrich, feels like Netanyahu needs to speed up the pace of the war and not to listen to any talks right now about a ceasefire, believing that the military action will help lead to the release of many of the hostages. Others, like the Hostage Families Forum, they want to end the war entirely to get the hostages home. There is some political opposition to Netanyahu as well. Certainly, most Israelis want the war to end quickly, but also want to make sure that Hamas is defeated. And that's why many people are saying it's very important to be praying for Israel right now for a successful end to the war and a return of all the hostages.
Chris, what more can you tell us about the deaths of 5 journalists in an Israeli airstrike?
Well, the IDF released documentation that they were working for Hamas. The most well-known, and you saw it there in Paul's report, Anas al-Sharif. He was the head of a terrorist cell. He was responsible for rocket attacks against Israelis and IDF troops. The IDF produced documents about Anas, and including his Hamas ID number. He was participating in training courses. There were salary documents from Hamas. And as you saw in the report, selfies with many of the Hamas leaders, including Yahya Sinwar. Journalists inside Gaza are not independent, most subject to Hamas. He was a very influential voice on Al Jazeera, and I'll just read one of his tweets that came out just after October 7th. 9 hours later on that day, and the heroes are still roaming around the country, killing and capturing. God, how great you are. And so that was this Al Jazeera reporter on October 7th.
Chris, is the Israeli public concerned about the anti-Semitic attacks we are hearing around the world?
Ephraim, they're shocked. And I think that's not just Israelis here, but Jews around the world. We saw that most recent example of that Jewish Canadian brutally assaulted in front of his children. The video, it does show him being beaten repeatedly. His kippah was thrown into the water. And as Paul said, President Herzog spoke to him, offered him comfort, and he said, we're here for you, as well as the whole Jewish people. And I think that is indicative of how people here in Israel, the president from down, consider this a shocking event. And just one latest example of many around the world. For example, we were there a couple of months ago with Aliyah, many French Jews making Aliyah, coming here to Israel to start a new life, just warning of how difficult it is for Jews in France itself, but spreading to Canada and other places around the world. And many are fearing that it might get worse. And some are saying to the Jews in the diaspora, it's time to come home back to Israel.
Before we let you go, what can we expect today on Jerusalem Dateline?
Well, we have a post from Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell telling, after so many other countries are calling for a Palestinian state, she is saying, we're here, we're not going anywhere. Also a story from George Thomas about this tragic story of mass execution in Iran for political dissidents and religious minorities. And also a story by Julie Stahl about the disengagement 20 years later. That was when 9,000 Jews were evicted out of Gaza Strip, 21 thriving Jewish communities, and they were all taken away. And sadly, you can see a direct connection between the pullout 20 years ago, how Hamas took over, and you can see the connection to October 7th. And finally, we talked with Paul Petit, a reporter in that story, about what is it like, his impressions of coming here to Israel for the very first time.
All right, our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell, we thank you so much. Of course, we look forward to getting back with you in the days ahead this week. I want to remind you at home, you can get the latest from Jerusalem Dateline at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can find it on the CBN News Channel. You can also watch it on the CBN News app, and it's also available on YouTube. Back here at home, despite declining numbers, President Trump says crime in Washington, D.C. is out of control, and he's sending in the National Guard to take over the police department. Monday, the president promised a swift crackdown on criminal activity and homelessness in the nation's capital. But D.C.'s mayor is pushing back. Wendy Griffith has more.
President Trump is calling up the National Guard in the nation's capital, saying it's needed to crack down on crime there.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse.
President Trump, who's been critical of D.C.'s crime rate for years, temporarily taking control of the D.C. police after a former government staffer who used to work for Elon Musk was attacked in an attempted carjacking, according to authorities. The president calling it Liberation Day in D.C.
We're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back. Under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States, I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is? And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control.
Sources say officials from the Secret Service, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and U.S. Park Police have been dispatched to the district, along with 120 FBI agents. The president also suggesting trying teenagers as young as 14 as adults. Despite the president's claims about violence in D.C., the city's police data shows crime in the nation's capital is down 7% since last year, and violent crime in D.C. hit a 30-year low in January.
If the priority is to show force in an American city, we know he can do that here. But it won't be because there's a spike in crime.
But NBC4 in Washington reported last month a D.C. police commander is under investigation for allegedly making changes to crime statistics in his district. The police union says supervisors in the police department manipulate crime data to make it appear violent crime is falling considerably compared to previous years. CBN White House correspondent Kelly Wright says in addition to his move against crime, the president is also focusing on cleaning up the city.
He told reporters that his administration is removing homeless people from under bridges and public spaces like public parks throughout the city. He says his efforts are to make D.C. safe again and beautiful again.
And Trump's efforts to crack down on crime will apparently not end in D.C. The president saying his efforts will go to other cities, including New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Baltimore. Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Here now are some other stories making headlines in the CBN newsroom at this hour. President Donald Trump is extending a trade truce with China for another 90 days. The previous deadline was 12:01 this morning. Without a deal, the U.S. would have raised taxes on Chinese imports more than 30%. Beijing is expected to respond, raising levies on U.S. exports to China. Police are investigating a shooting outside a Target in North Austin, Texas, that killed 2 adults and 1 child.
I heard 2 gunshots. I ran towards the front to see what was going on, and then I saw everyone scattering towards the back, towards the exit. I was just in a panic mode, just running for my life.
It said the suspect suffered from mental health issues, that he fled the scene in a stolen car from the parking lot. He later crashed before stealing another vehicle from a car dealership. Police were able to apprehend him after a bystander called for help. There is an investigation to find the motive for the crimes. Coming up, we are going to look at the massive crackdown taking place in Iran and the warning a former war crimes prosecutor says is happening in plain sight. Stay with us. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. A brutal crackdown is taking place inside Iran, including mass executions and political arrests. This time, it's not hidden. A former war crimes prosecutor is sounding the alarm to warn the world of an unfolding massacre that's happening in plain sight. CBN's George Thomas is on this story.
Stephen Rapp, former U.S. ambassador at large in the Office of Global Criminal Justice, tells CBN News the Iranian regime isn't just cracking down with arrests or beatings, it's using executions to silence dissent, with the numbers rising fast after the recent war with Israel.
There are thousands of political prisoners, and they could charge them with these phony charges and begin mass executions, really judicial murders of peaceful opponents.
In 2023, Iran executed more than 850 people. A year later, that number jumped to 975. And now, just 8 months into 2025, over 700 executions have already been recorded.
The Islamic Republic continues to be the leading state sponsor of executions, second to the Chinese Communist Party.
Among those put to death, 3 Kurdish men and a top nuclear scientist accused of collaborating with Israel.
The regime fears its people more than a potential external attack because ultimately, in their perspective, they can absorb any attack on their military installations. However, if the discontent internally were to expand and lead to nationwide unrest, as it has in the past, it would really be the key catalyst for regime collapse.
Others sentenced to death are charged with vague offenses like, quote, enmity against God.
What I fear is instead of 1,000 a year, we could end up with literally tens of thousands being executed.
People are being rounded up all over the place. People are being stopped in the streets and told to hand over their cell phones while they check messaging history, photos taken, phone calls made, websites visited. I mean, it's just blanket across the board. Cars are being stopped and checked. Homes are being raided. No one is safe.
And it's not only political activists being targeted.
As the internal crackdowns expand and intensify, the religious minorities tend to be on the front lines of this repression apparatus.
Just last month, 21 Iranian Christians were arrested in these 6 cities. Officials accused them of spreading Zionist Christianity and, quote, acting against national security.
Those 2 things are the classic accusations for Christians when they get arrested and charged with something. Of course, the government just wants to stop the spread of Christianity in Iran, but this is amplified now because they are paranoid.
Days after the Israel-Iran ceasefire, the regime's state-run Fars news agency, which is tied to the Revolutionary Guard, openly called for a repeat of the 1988 massacre, when 30,000 political prisoners were secretly executed.
They got away with murder, mass murder in 1988. They think they can get away with it again.
As executions mount and repression deepens, human rights advocates warn the almost worldwide silence only enables the regime's growing brutality.
As long as the international community, the United States and Europe particularly, do not speak up against these heinous crimes, the regime therefore doesn't feel any obligation to scale back its internal repression.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Still ahead, Dr. Kenneth Cooper developed the concept of aerobics. Now he's talking to us about his new book, Grow Healthier as You Grow Older. Stay with us. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. This one is hard to believe. There was a time when doctors thought too much exercise was a bad thing. Well, of course, that all changed. And it happened in 1968 when Dr. Kenneth Cooper, the father of aerobics, released his groundbreaking research. On this week's episode of Healthy Living, the Good Doctor show, who is now 94, talks about his new book, Grow Healthier as You Grow Older, and he discovered the value of aerobic exercise.
When I was in high school in Oklahoma City, my father, practicing dentist, never supported my athletic endeavors. Even though I won the state championship in the mile run in Oklahoma, almost set a new state record, it was all state in basketball, he never saw me participate in a running event or playing basketball because he was convinced, as was a popular fitting back in those days, if you exercise too much, you get an athletic heart. They felt that the heart would enlarge in size as people exercise too much. You stop exercise, converts into fat, and you die early. But to the contrary, back in those days, we thought that enlarged heart was because of a muscular heart. But it wasn't so much muscular as it was an enlargement of the heart itself because of the dilatation of the left ventricle. As a result of that, you can increase the ejection fraction, that's the amount of blood that can be pumped out, which is heartbeat. And that's why the resting heart rate endurance athletes goes from an average of 72 down into the 45s and 50s. It's an efficiency, something designed by the Lord for us to benefit from having a more efficient heart. And that's why these endurance athletes, myself, are living longer as I am in my 95th year. My running weight was about 168 pounds. But I got into medical school and learned a very important point, that obesity is the most common manifestation of stress. Ate to keep awake at night. Even worse during internship. And during that period of time, I increased from 168 to 204. And I was totally inactive until at 29 years of age, I went water skiing again for the first time up in Lake Texoma here in North Texas. And about halfway through that slalom course, I'd skied many times before, I got hit with chest pain, a racing heart. They got me over to the side. By the time I got over there, the pain had disappeared and the heart rate had come back to normal. The next day, I was evaluated thoroughly at the School of Aerospace Medicine in San Antonio. I was hypertense. I was pre-diabetic, overweight, inactive. A complete workup with these people said that the only thing wrong with you, doc, you're out of shape. But I lost the weight within 6 months. I ran a first marathon a year later. I ran for 40 years and 38,000 miles, and all those symptoms disappeared. I thought this was a field of medicine which has been sadly ignored, and that is the prevention of disease. I controlled the blood pressure. I controlled the diabetes by doing something but changing my lifestyle. And so that was the divine intervention of my life. Two major things I'm trying to do with this new book is, number one, is to motivate people to realize that your health, your longevity is what you do for yourself. It's not what's done for you by the government, by the insurance companies, even by your physicians as they're trained in preventive medicine. And no drug can replicate the benefits of an active lifestyle. So I'm trying to motivate people to change their lifestyle and live a long, active, and healthy life as I'm living. Secondly, I'm trying to motivate the medical profession to accept the subspecialty of preventive medicine. It still isn't accepted in the medicine today.
Looks amazing. You can learn more about the benefits of exercise from Dr. Kenneth Cooper. Of course, he is the father of aerobics. On this week's edition of Healthy Living is where you'll find that it begins today on the CBN News Channel at 2:30 and again at 8:30 Eastern Time. You can also see it on the CBN News app, or you can find it on YouTube. Stay with us. Your Tuesday Tweetable is coming up next. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Sarah's Oil is an upcoming film based on the true story of an 11-year-old girl who became one of the nation's first African-American millionaires. Here's a preview.
My name's Sarah Rector. The state gave me 160 acres on account of my ancestors, and there's all a lot.
Our Aunt Sarah lived an incredible life, and it's important to us that her story is being told.
I mean, can you imagine? She was 11 years old. They struck oil on the land, and suddenly she's worth millions. It's almost so incredible. It's hard to believe that it's true.
I'll give you $20 an acre.
I ain't selling.
She was feisty.
Yes.
I like that.
Sassy.
Yeah, she was really sassy, you know. She knew what she wanted.
That's what's important.
I know we got oil.
How you know, girl?
God gave me ears to hear.
Regardless of what we're faced with, we still carry that faith because it's precious.
I think Sarah will be proud of the way her story is portrayed.
That's all we wanted. We want to see the truth. It's a privilege to let everyone know who Sarah Rector was.
Right.
Sarah's Oil is in theaters November 7th. Studio 5 will have more on this great story in the coming weeks. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. This is a message I pray encourages you, and I hope you will post, tag, tweet, and share it with those in your circles of influence. A picture frame often makes a photo look better. Well, the same is true of life. The way you frame a situation changes the way you see it. Look for the blessing and the lesson in everything, knowing all things work together for your good and for God's glory. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel at any time, as well as online, cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Of course, that's formerly known as Twitter. We'll see you back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.